Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 2, or maybe not welcome back, maybe this is your first time. If you've watched this more than once, then either you have a very bad short-term memory, or anyway, maybe you just got nothing better to do with your time than watch me talk about QA, which if you've got nothing better to do with your time, oh man. Anyway, sorry. So, welcome to L2QA, part 2. Now, what is the purpose of this particular YouTube series? Well, it is to teach people how QA, or quality assurance, actually works, both at big game companies and for people who are just doing it in their houses, you know, who get involved in an open beta for something like Elder Scrolls Online. I really want into the thing. I've entered, I put all my stuff in. The thing says I have an excellent chance of being selected. We'll see. It's okay. Prayer never hurts. Well, sometimes it does, but that's a whole different thing. Probably in Skyrim. That prayer, depending on your god, Boethia. Episode 2. Welcome to episode 2. If you missed episode 1, you could probably click on this. I'm not going to click it from the back side, so you can do that. If you have seen episode 1, which would be that one, and you've seen episode 2, which would be this one, and you haven't seen episode 3, you can click on that. Now, if you click on that and it doesn't work, that is a bug. Don't bug it, though. I know it doesn't work because I haven't finished editing the thing yet. However, if it does work, and that means that I have finished editing it and I have uploaded it to YouTube, which means that what I'm saying now is a bug, because I should have gone back and revise the design so that it did. See how this works? It gets confusing sometimes. So in episode 1, we talked about black box testers who function very much in the same way as the end user. You know, their perspective is you've just spent 60 to 120, if you're getting a collector's edition, you know, of your dollars, euros, francs, rubles, Deutschmarks, what have you, euros, and you, of your money in this economy, which in this country is not that good right now, for about the last several years, you take your game home and you put it into your machine, be it a console or your PC or whatever, and suddenly not only does the game crash, but it completely reformats your hard drive. That is a bug. Little bitty one, little baby, practically insignificant. It's no wonder the game shipped with it, because, you know, I mean, who really would have noticed that ever? That would be, yeah. Anyway, so that's what the black box testers do. They look at things from the customer's perspective. For the embedded testers, or the white box or gray box testers, it's a little bit different. We are usually involved much earlier in the design process. We're right there at the beginning, when the very design of the game is starting to come together, when the producers are sitting down with the developers and saying, here's my vision, here's what I want to do. And the developers are going, okay, well, we could do that like this, and like this, and like this. Usually, the embedded tester is there, and at the very least, trying to figure out, you know, write down test plans. How am I going to verify that that's doing what it's supposed to do? Now, like the black box tester, you're not really, it's not that you're not allowed to say supposed to or should, but a white box or gray box tester, an embedded tester, has much more freedom with what should or should not happen. Since they're involved so much earlier, they actually have some, at least small amount of input on exactly what the game design should be, if only to make it easier to test or implement. The other thing that we do is we try to help keep things in scope, because when people start getting excited about a project, they start trying to implement more features and more features and more features, and pretty soon they do what is called scope creep, and you start extending outside of the boundaries of, wait, where are my hands? Oh my God, they're gone. No, they're still here. But you got outside the boundaries of what was defined. You know, you get that far. Once you start suffering from scope creep, you start risking blowing your schedules. You know, you're supposed to hit pre-alpha on a given day. You're supposed to hit alpha and beta and final and release at a certain time of year, because that's the way the company wants to do it, because maybe they're trying to maximize on the holiday schedule or whatever. There are deadlines involved, and if you start getting into scope creep, you risk overrunning those deadlines. It's like, well, that's okay, we just won't implement as many features. Well, that's why QA is usually involved in the beginning, because it may take 5-6 days to implement a feature, but it may take 3 or 4 weeks to test that feature thoroughly. And an embedded tester has to understand. That's why it's a much more technical aspect, which is why I'm so bad at it, I think. Anyway, I communicate well with people. I think that's why I'm still here. I hope. Anyway, where was I? Right. So it'll take, a long time to test this particular feature, test it thoroughly, and to test it properly. Because just giving it a once over, remember in episode 1 I said maybe you're dealing with this this bug with the crafting table, but maybe it only occurs 30% of the time. So you give this thing a once over as a white box tester, and you happen to hit the positive side of that thing. It's like, okay, maybe that only fails 30% of the time as well, and you were in that 70%, so you don't know that it's there. Does that mean it's a bug? Yes, it's still a bug. The reproduction rate is very low, but that doesn't mean that it's not there. So you have to test things thoroughly. Sometimes you do what is called a soak test, and you have to just leave a game sitting at a menu screen or sitting in open world for days looking for memory leaks, because that's how you find them. You just leave the game sitting there. You have like 5 or 6 extra, consoles or machines or whatever just sitting there doing nothing, soaking, like your nails in dishwashing liquid or something. There's lots of different elements to it. I could never describe them all here, so I'm trying to kind of give you a baseline on this. So we're involved much earlier. We're much closer to the devs and the producers because we're there closer to the beginning of the process, so we can help put in our input. And even if we're not putting in input, at the very least we're figuring out the beginnings of a test plan. This is what we need to make sure that we do to verify that this feature and this feature, this feature, this feature, and this feature are all working the way that these guys have just said they're supposed to. Because you will be there when the design documents are written, and you get the chance to sit there and say, okay, so it's supposed to do that and that and that, and that's where you come up with your design documents. So in that respect, we're still accountants. You still have to take these guys and you say, no, you can't implement that. You're already at the limits of what you can do with the amount of time that you have. You don't have the resources to add anymore. Sorry, no. That again is where courage comes in. QA testers, there's a lot of stuff. Doesn't matter whether you're an embedded tester or a black box tester. There has to be courage. There has to be accountability. You have to be able to tell somebody, no, you don't have time. We don't have the manpower to test it. Save this stuff for, DLC or something, but don't try to implement this right now. We don't have time. I'm looking at my list over here on the whiteboard. You get more input into design, which is what I said. Help maintain scope, establishing test plans, verifying initial functionality. That's the next thing on the list. And man, this is going to be a short episode because we're almost done. Verifying initial functionality. When a developer finishes a given feature and says, okay, here it is, and you're going to test that particular feature. Now, with black box testers, they tend to get to test everything all as one big piece. With embedded testers, they tend to test things piecemeal. In other words, a developer will say, here's this piece of the thing, and so you can test this one part or this one part, but they don't start getting plugged into the rest of the thing until you get further on in the cycle. It's the same thing with the development cycle. When you're in pre-alpha and alpha and beta and final and gold, you're very much in the pre-alpha state. I like to think of it like you're building a car. When you're at this very early stage with the embedded testers, you've got the producers saying, this is what I've got in mind. And they've got these concept sketches of this car. And the engineers are like, okay, we could use this particular type of drivetrain. We could build the body out of this, this weird polyfiber organic alloy that absorbs sunlight and rainwater, and it feeds on oil spills and stuff, and it whatever. That would actually be kind of a cool car. Anyway, getting away from myself there, but good idea. Write that down. So you're there at the beginning, and you're like, okay, this is all really cool and everything, but why was the verifying initial functionality. So you're there, you see what they're doing, and you get an idea of the scope of what it is they're trying to do. And when he hands it to you, says, okay, here, this piece is ready. And you test it, and you make sure that, yes, in fact, this piece is done. So that's your part of building the car, is saying, okay, we now have a transmission, and yes, the transmission does in fact shift gears. Very nice, awesome. And slowly the car goes together, and that's kind of the pre-alpha to alpha. And you're putting the pieces of the car together, and Blackbox QA kind of gets to reach in and occasionally start the engine and listen to it purr for a little bit. Oh, that's nice. Like, yeah, we're not quite done yet, hang on. And there's sort of this teeter-totter effect going on. It's like embedded QA is much more at the beginning, and Blackbox QA is much more at the end. By the time things tip over and the car is put together, and you hand it off to QA, Blackbox QA, and you say, drive that thing until it falls apart and tell me where it breaks. And they go, yes, master, yes, and then they go off and do their thing. Which is really kind of funny to imagine them doing that. At that point, the seesaw kind of tips the other direction, and they have more control over what's going on in the QA process. But by that time, usually, all the design and the pre-planning and everything is way done, and they've got a really solid idea of what the game is going to be, and they've handed it off. They're getting bugs in from the testers and whatnot, saying, okay, well, this is broken, and this is broken, and this is broken. Then they put their fixes out. But for the most part, everybody on this side has now moved on. In the case of games, usually they'll be like working on maybe a patch, because there might be some bugs, like I said in the last episode, you're just never going to get fixed. And maybe they're so bad that there are individual pieces of the game functionality that you pulled out, you stripped it out, because like there's no way that I can get this fixed in time for release, and I don't want to release with it in there and broken. So you either strip it out or you disable it or something, and you keep working on it over here until it's done and it's fixed and it's working. Then you release it as a patch or DLC or whatever. The point is, they're working on the main game, you're working on a patch or a DLC over here. Now you're getting the design laid out. This is how we're going to run this patch. We're going to have this feature, and this feature. These are the ones that we're going to implement in this first patch or in this first piece of DLC or whatever. And you're there to make sure that, okay, then this is how we test it, this is what we're going to do, and this is how much we can implement with the amount of time and manpower and resources that we have available. And you keep them within scope so that they don't continue to add features until such time as they overrun their resource budget, and now they're late on their release. So that's part of what you do. So that's basically what white and gray box testers do. It's a much deeper involvement. It's also much more technical. So you need to have a deeper understanding of how code works if you're actually dealing with, like, if you're dealing with things that are happening through the web. It's like maybe there are certain websites that they have to be downloaded from. There are certain, maybe they use QuickTime events, and you have to understand how that kind of crap works. Whatever. Like I said, most of it is over my head. It's horrible. It's not horrible, and it is a good job, and it's very interesting. It's just very technical, and I am not. So, but if you've got a good head for the technical aspects of game design, especially if you're trying to become a game designer, good place to go is embedded QA, because sometimes people will be like, man, I cannot figure this out, I don't know why this is breaking. But because you have studied game design, maybe you went to some college that's what you studied, was game design, and that's what you want to do. Embedded QA is a damn good place to get in there, because sometimes you're going to have a lot better chance of proving what you can do as an embedded tester than you are as a black box tester. Because a lot of times it'll be like, that's cute, kid. Go back to the kiddie table. Let mom and dad talk for a second, okay? They don't mean to be rude to black box testers. In a lot of cases, that don't presume that they are. Sometimes it seems that way. That's why I said in the last episode you got to have a thick skin. And white box testers, embedded testers, the same sort of thing. Again, you're still pointing out negative stuff. You're pointing out, no, you can't do this. That's going to take too much time. We cannot test that. We don't have the time to test it. You can't put that in this release. You got to have the courage to be able to do it. You got to have a thick skin, because they're going to fight you on a lot of things, and it's going to seem very adversarial. But you all have to remember. Everybody has to remember. You all have the same goal in mind, and that is releasing the best product possible. Be patient. Communicate. Just do what you got to do to get the job done. But remember to see all perspectives, because man, will save you so much trouble in the long run. All right? Okay, that's it for episode 2. I can't believe it was this short, and I felt like I didn't ramble this time. That's really weird. Oh well. So, we're moving on to episode 3. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one. That one, it's going to be like, okay, you're sitting at home, you got the piece of email that says, hey, welcome to Elder Scrolls Online, closed beta test, and you're bouncing all over the house like a freaking maniac on like 8 different kinds of speed, and you're just making sounds that I am incapable of getting into a high enough register to be able to produce. And people in third world countries are going, what does that sound? Is that, it sounds like a hummingbird having a seizure. I'm not quite sure what that is. Suffice to say, I myself very excited about the possibility of getting in on the Elder Scrolls Online or any other MMO, beta testing thing, because I just enjoy making the games better. I don't, which is bizarre because I don't like video games that much. It's really weird. I don't know. I'm a weird person. We're drifting again. See, I told you I'd drift. Eventually, I knew I was going to drift in this episode. I always do. Go to episode 3. It's right there. Well, or you could just wait. Either one. Yeah. Yeah.